Hi everyone, I'm Shelley and you're watching There's No Place Like Home. I'm back with another question the narrative video, and today's topic is, was King Nebuchadnezzar a werewolf? I decided to do this video after someone left a comment on the last video that I did, which just explored some claims that Judas Iscariot was the first vampire. In the comment section there, someone reminded me of the fact that many people believe that King Nebuchadnezzar of both the books of Daniel and Jeremiah actually became a werewolf at one point. So, you know what? This is something that is going to be a little bit lighter. I always think it's funny when I say that things like vampires and werewolves are lighter. I don't mean lighter in mood, but I just mean you don't have to quite think so much about it. And I also think that they're not quite as controversial as some of the stuff that I talk about. So for me, it's a bit of a break. So let's take this break and let's explore the claim that Nebuchadnezzar was a werewolf. So for those of you who aren't really sure where this is coming from, we're going to start in the book of Daniel, and I'm going to read chapter 4. King Nebuchadnezzar, to all peoples, nations, and languages that dwell in all the earth, peace be multiplied to you. It has seemed good to me to show the signs and wonders that the Most High God has done for me. How great are his signs, how mighty his wonders. His kingdom is an everlasting kingdom, and his dominion endures from generation to generation. I, Nebuchadnezzar, was at ease in my house and prospering in my palace. I saw a dream that made me afraid. As I lay in bed, the fancies and the visions of my head alarmed me. So I made a decree that all the wise men of Babylon should be brought before me, that they might make known to me the interpretation of the dream. Then the magicians, the enchanters, the Chaldeans, and the astrologers came in, and I told them the dream, but they could not make known to me its interpretation. At last Daniel came in before me, he who was named Belteshazzar, after the name of my God, and in whom is the spirit of the holy gods. And I told him the dream, saying, O Belteshazzar, chief of the magicians, because I know that the spirit of the holy gods is in you, and that no mystery is too difficult for you, tell me the visions of my dream that I saw, and their interpretation. The visions of my head as I lay in bed were these. I saw, and behold, a tree in the midst of the earth, and its height was great. The tree grew and became strong, and its top reached to heaven, and it was visible to the end of the whole earth. Its leaves were beautiful, and its fruit abundant, and in it was food for all. The beasts of the field found shade under it, and the birds of the heavens lived in its branches, and all flesh was fed from it. I saw in the visions of my head as I lay in bed, and behold, a watcher, a holy one, came down from heaven. He proclaimed aloud and said thus, Chop down the tree and lop off its branches, strip off its leaves and scatter its fruit. Let the beasts flee from under it, and the birds from its branches. But leave the stump of its roots in the earth, bound with a band of iron and bronze, amid the tender grass of the field. Let him be wet with the dew of heaven. Let his portion be with the beasts in the grass of the earth. Let his mind be changed from a man's, and let a beast's mind be given to him, and let 7 periods of time pass over him. The sentence is by the decree of the watchers, the decision by the word of the holy ones, to the end that the living may know that the Most High rules the kingdom of men, and gives it to whom he will, and sets over it the lowliest of men. This dream I, King Nebuchadnezzar, saw, and you, O Belteshazzar, tell me the interpretation, because all the wise men of my kingdom are not able to make known to me the interpretation. But you are able, for the spirit of the holy gods is in you. Then Daniel, whose name was Belteshazzar, was dismayed for a while, and his thoughts alarmed him. The king answered and said, Belteshazzar, let not the dream or the interpretation alarm you. Belteshazzar answered and said, My lord, may the dream be for those who hate you, and its interpretation for your enemies. The tree you saw, which grew and became strong, so that its top reached to heaven, and it was visible to the end of the whole earth, whose leaves were beautiful and its fruit abundant, and in which was food for all, under which beasts of the field found shade, and in whose branches the birds of the heavens lived. It is you, O king, who have grown and become strong. Your greatness has grown and reaches to heaven, and your dominion to the ends of the earth. And because the king saw a watcher, a holy one, coming down from heaven and saying, "Chop down the tree and destroy it, but leave the stump of its roots in the earth, bound with a band of iron and bronze, in the tender grass of the field, and let him be wet with the dew of heaven, and let his portion be with the beasts of the field, till 7 periods of time pass over him." This is the interpretation, O king. It is a decree of the Most High, which has come upon my lord the king, that you shall be driven from among men, and your dwelling shall be with the beasts of the field. You shall be made to eat grass like an ox, and you shall be wet with the dew of heaven, and 7 periods of time shall pass over you, till you know that the Most High rules the kingdom of men, and gives it to whom he will. And as it was commanded to leave the stump of the roots of the tree, your kingdom shall be confirmed for you from the time that you know that heaven rules. Therefore, O king, let my counsel be acceptable to you. Break off your sins by practicing righteousness, and your iniquities by showing mercy to the oppressed, that there may perhaps be a lengthening of your prosperity. All this came upon King Nebuchadnezzar. At the end of 12 months, he was walking on the roof of the royal palace of Babylon. And the king answered and said, "Is not this great Babylon, which I have built by my mighty power as a royal residence and for the glory of my majesty?" While the words were still in the king's mouth, there fell a voice from heaven. "O King Nebuchadnezzar, to you it is spoken. The kingdom has departed from you, and you shall be driven from among men, and your dwelling shall be with the beasts of the field, and you shall be made to eat grass like an ox, and 7 periods of time shall pass over you, until you know that the Most High rules the kingdom of men and gives it to whom he will." Immediately the word was fulfilled against Nebuchadnezzar. He was driven from among men, and ate grass like an ox, and his body was wet with the dew of heaven, till his hair grew as long as eagle's feathers, and his nails were like birds' claws. At the end of the days, Nebuchadnezzar lifted my eyes to heaven, and my reason returned to me, and I blessed the Most High, and praised and honored him who lives forever. For his dominion is an everlasting dominion, and his kingdom endures from generation to generation. All the inhabitants of the earth are accounted as nothing, and he does according to his will among the host of heaven, and among the inhabitants of the earth, and none can stay his hand, or say to him, "What have you done?" At the same time my reason returned to me, and for the glory of my kingdom my majesty and splendor returned to me. My counselors and my lords sought me, and I was established in my kingdom, and still more greatness was added to me. Now I, Nebuchadnezzar, praise and extol and honor the King of heaven, for all his works are right, and his ways are just, and those who walk in pride he is able to humble. Just a couple of months ago, I had the privilege of going to Sight and Sound in Lancaster, PA, to see Daniel. And what it is a show that goes through the entire book of Daniel. And I remember when it did this part of King Nebuchadnezzar going insane and going out into the forest. And I remember that even in that show, there was a physical transformation of King Nebuchadnezzar. I know that so many people think that it was just a mental change in him. And yes, certainly his hair grew long and his nails grew long to a claw-like state. But I remember seeing in the show, it was a pretty horrific transformation on the outside too that you were able to see. And so I was able to really understand why so many people can look at this account and think, wow, was Nebuchadnezzar actually a werewolf? So as a summary of what I just read to you from Daniel 4, King Nebuchadnezzar, he was very, very prideful. And as a punishment for his pride, God set it upon him that he was going to have the mind of a beast, and he was going to live among the beasts, out in the wild, eat grass. And this was going to happen to him for 7 years. And that is exactly what the book of Daniel tells us happened. He had a dream. Belteshazzar, or Daniel, interpreted the dream, told him this was going to happen, and indeed 12 months after having the dream, this is exactly what happened to him. So let's explore a little bit about this story. Here is an article called The Mesopotamian King Who Suffered from Lycanthropy. Now, first of all, I'm going to just go over the difference between what most people think of as lycanthropy. Okay, when I say most people, I'm going to say most people who are in the truther movement, most people who watch my videos. If you hear screaming, it is my neighbors outside. Their children are outside screaming and doing I don't know what. But anyway, most people in the truther community, when they hear the word lycanthrope or lycanthropy, they think of werewolves. Whereas in the psychological community, lycanthropy is a condition where people mentally believe that they are animals and that they are not specifically these animals. So that's a very important distinction to make. And we'll explore a little bit about lycanthropy also in this video. But this is just a short little article that I found. It says, in legend, lycanthropy is a condition in which a human being is magically transformed into a wolf. In medical and psychological terms, lycanthropy describes a delusional state during which sufferers believe they have taken on lupine characteristics, lupine means wolf, while retaining vestiges of human consciousness. Some believe that King Nebuchadnezzar II of the Mesopotamian capital Babylon suffered from lycanthropy. So it tells us that King Nebuchadnezzar II was the second king in the Chaldean dynasty of Babylonian kings founded by his father, Nabopolassar. As a young man, Nebuchadnezzar II served his father, leading military conquests against Egypt. Just going to head down to the part about the lycanthropy. In the Old Testament, the book of Daniel describes a period in which God sent judgment on Nebuchadnezzar for his pride, declaring that Nebuchadnezzar was driven away from people and ate grass like the ox. His body was drenched with the dew of heaven until his hair grew like the feathers of an eagle and his nails like the claws of a bird. Some biblical scholars have interpreted this passage to mean that Nebuchadnezzar suffered from lycanthropy, either in reality or as a psychosis. In the biblical account, Nebuchadnezzar humbles himself before God and is restored to sanity. There are some alternate explanations for what happened to King Nebuchadnezzar. It says other biblical scholars suggested that the imagery in the book of Daniel refers to demonic torment and extreme sickness and suffering. These scholars note that the animals mentioned in this passage, oxen and eagles, are used in ancient Mesopotamian, Sumerian, and Babylonian myths to denote demonic beings and death, and that both ancient Hebrew and ancient Babylonian beliefs equated illness with demonic torment. Those who accept this interpretation believe that Nebuchadnezzar II did not suffer from lycanthropy, but from an agonizing illness which took him near to death. Regardless of which biblical interpretation is preferred, the story is seen by Jewish and Christian scholars as of one of divine affliction, which leads to repentance and restoration and ultimately to humble thanksgiving. So now let's just read a little bit about werewolves from Britannica. It says, werewolf in European folklore, a man who turns into a wolf at night and devours animals, peoples, or corpses, but returns to human form by day. So if you stop right there, if we go back to Daniel 4 and take a look at what Nebuchadnezzar was eating while he was in the fields, it will tell you that he ate grass like an ox. Okay, so we know that he was not eating the things that werewolves typically do. So I think that's something important to remember. He also did not return to human form by day. He was in that state for 7 years. So I'm assuming 24 hours a day for 7 years. He was in that beast-like condition. So let's just continue. Some werewolves change shape at will. Others, in whom the condition is hereditary or acquired by having been bitten by a werewolf, change shape involuntarily under the influence of a full moon. If he is wounded in wolf form, the wounds will show in his human form and may lead to his detection. Belief in werewolves is found throughout the world. The psychiatric condition in which a person believes he is a wolf is called lycanthropy. In countries in which wolves are not common, the monster may assume the form of another dangerous animal, such as the bear, tiger, or hyena. In French folklore, the werewolf is called loup-garou. France was particularly afflicted with reports of them in the 16th century, and there were many notable convictions and executions of loup-garou. As the subject for 20th century horror films, the werewolf tradition is second only to the vampire tradition in popularity. Werewolves are believed to turn into vampires after death. I actually never heard that before. So that is very interesting. You learn something new every day, right? So if you take the article that we just read and you compare it to what we read in Daniel 4, again, Nebuchadnezzar, he was eating grass, not corpses or people or animals like werewolves are said to eat. And Nebuchadnezzar also was in that, we could say, frame of mind or in that form, depending on how you look at it, for 7 years. This wasn't something that he transformed out of. So on the surface, it certainly seems like he was not what we would look at as a traditional werewolf. I do find it very interesting, though, that it does say that in other countries, it could be other animals. But again, bear, tiger, hyena, it does seem to be predators, carnivores, and he was eating grass like an ox. So again, just some very interesting distinctions. Let's take a look at lycanthropy. Lycanthropy is a mental disorder in which the patient believes that he is a wolf or some other non-human animal. So right there again, we see that lycanthropy, whenever I heard lycanthrope or lycanthropy, I always specifically thought of wolves. But reading this, lycanthropy, when it comes to the mental disorder, can be other animals as well. Undoubtedly stimulated by the once widespread superstition that lycanthropy is a supernatural condition in which men actually assume the physical form of werewolves or other animals, the delusion has been most likely to occur among people who believe in reincarnation and the transmigration of souls. Usually, a person is deemed to take the form of the most dangerous beast of prey of the region, the wolf or bear in Europe and northern Asia, the hyena or leopard in Africa, and the tiger in India, China, Japan, and elsewhere in Asia. But other animals are mentioned too. Both the superstition and the psychiatric disorder are linked with belief in animal guardian spirits, vampires, totemism, witches, and werewolves. The folklore, fairy tales, and legends of many nations and peoples show evidence of lycanthropic belief. Stories of men turning into beasts go back to antiquity. In parts of ancient Greece, werewolf myths, presumably stemming from prehistoric times, became linked with the Olympian religion. In Arcadia, a region plagued by wolves, there was a cult of the wolf, Zeus. Mount Lycaeus was the scene of a yearly gathering at which the priests were said to prepare a sacrificial feast that included meat mixed with human parts. Gross. According to legend, whoever tasted it became a wolf and could not turn back into a man unless he abstained from human flesh for 9 years. The Romans also knew of this superstition. Anyone who was supposed to have been turned into a wolf by means of magic spells or herbs was called Versipellis by the Romans. Stories about the werewolf were widely believed in Europe during the Middle Ages. Outlaws and bandits played on these superstitions by sometimes wearing wolf skins over their armor. At that time, people were unusually prone to develop the delusion that they themselves were wolves. Suspected lycanthropists, I think that's better, lycanthropists, were burned alive if convicted. Only rarely was their condition recognized as a psychological disturbance. Although the superstition is no longer common, traces still linger in some primitive and isolated areas. The last article that I'm going to share with you is from Answers in Genesis, who I think most of you know I don't agree with a lot of the time, but I found this article interesting, so we'll share just a little bit. History, including the history in the Bible's Old Testament and the annals of modern medicine, record people who sincerely thought they became animals. And that would certainly seem like King Nebuchadnezzar. Taking its name from the cursed lycanthropy is the psychiatric syndrome in which a person believes he or she shapeshifts into a wolf or other animal. Daniel 4 records how such a delusion fell upon the Babylonian king Nebuchadnezzar. Despite Daniel's warning that he should avoid pride because he only held power with God's permission, Nebuchadnezzar declared himself the author of his own good fortune and the designer of his own destiny. As God had warned through Daniel's prophecy, Nebuchadnezzar suffered what he would consider a mental breakdown, behaving and being treated as a beast until he came to know that the Most High rules in the kingdom of men. And so this is just from the book of Daniel, what we were reading, another description of what happened to him. That true story had a happy ending, for so chastened Nebuchadnezzar eventually recovered his wits and declared, "Now I, Nebuchadnezzar, praise and extol and honor the King of heaven, all of whose works are truth, and his ways justice, and those who walk in pride he is able to put down." Modern psychiatrists consider lycanthropy a rare form of schizophrenia. When patients with clinical lycanthropy think they are animals other than wolves, additional terms may apply. For instance, Nebuchadnezzar's lycanthropy is also called Boanthropy because he behaved like a cow, a bovine animal. And that would make sense because of the eating of the grass. Like Nebuchadnezzar, victims alter their behavior in accordance with their delusion, but they of course suffer no physical manifestations of looking like a wolf or other animal. And so we don't know from reading the book of Daniel if King Nebuchadnezzar, had a drastic change in appearance. We know that his hair grew long like eagle's feathers, and we know that his nails grew into claws, but it doesn't really, and he obviously would have had a very formidable beast-like appearance, but we don't know if it's something as far as, him growing a snout and, sharp teeth and everything. It certainly doesn't say that in Daniel 4. And, it's fun to think about that, but it's not in the text for it to say specifically that he transformed into an actual werewolf. But, this is just my opinion, and, I could certainly be wrong in this, but at least from what I'm reading in Daniel 4, it seems like the change in his appearance was more due to things like that were simply from him being out in the wild for 7 years, not having his hair cut and his nails growing long, likely very dirty, and he wasn't in his right mind. And we know that God certainly put some sort of psychosis on him. So was it the clinical form of lycanthropy? In my opinion, I think that it's very possible. Now, my conclusion is certainly not to diminish the absolute supernatural things that do happen in the Bible all the time, and all of the what many people will call supernatural creatures that are found in the Bible. Now that's Saint Christopher. He's not found in the Bible, but he was a Christian saint who was said to be a doghead. Again, this was not from the Bible, but it is certainly, it's related to Christian iconography, but from the Bible, we do have mention in some passages of people who were referred to as lion heads or lion-faced men. Now, some people say, okay, they're just men who were very, very brave. They were warriors, and that's just the way to describe them, while other people say, no, it's very possible that these were physically lion head creatures, because we do have so many examples throughout worldwide civilizations of what look to be animal human hybrids. So it could be that as well. And another example is just the satyr. Satyrs are mentioned in the Bible, and there are also some instances where there are people who are referred to as the Edomites have been linked to goat men. and they are the ones that were said to come from Mount Seir. And if you look at what Seir means, it actually means shaggy goat. So there are a lot of really interesting things to look at in the Bible. And, this is just another one of those interesting things that people might come to different conclusions about. But that's why I decided to explore this, because some of you might have different opinions, and I'd love to learn about what you think in the comments. That's all that I have for you today. If you like this video, give it a thumbs up. If you haven't subscribed and would like to hear more of what I have to say, I would love if you would do that. If you have any questions or comments, you can leave one down below. And if you like my work and would like to support my channel, I will leave a link in the description for my YouTube membership, or you can just click on it right on my channel page. And I hope you have a great day.